This conference will now be recorded.
So you'll know that it's being recorded. Okay. Again, just for your own peace of mind, if you don't want to have your voice or whatever on a recording, that's what that's about. Kind of our best compromise between being able to be flexible and trying to preserve everyone's privacy. Okay, so where we left off in A&P1 was kind of in the middle of these sort of systems of control, right? We had the most of the basic parts of the nervous system, certainly all the general senses. We talked about the endocrine system. We kind of skipped over uh, well, we did skip over the special senses, right? There's part of the nervous system that's related to all of these other things, but because they are kind of off in their own little world, it was an easy chunk to carve out and move somewhere else. We reorganized the course. The reason we call them special senses is because they are located essentially entirely within one dedicated organ. Okay. When we talked about general senses, things like touch, okay, things like pain, things like temperature, they're located all over the body. Right? They're not in one specific place. They're not localized within one special organ. They're all over the place. With the special senses, we're going to have one structure dedicated just to it. And as it turns out, that one structure is going to be in the head. Okay. And in fact, when we talk about why organisms, why vertebrates anyway, have a head, okay, evolutionarily speaking, it's because we had this kind of swelling of nervous tissue where all of these sensory organs were in the same place. Okay. And we built kind of the head from there, right? These special senses here are, there are 5 of them. I don't think it's probably going to be surprising to you. We've got vision, taste, smell, hearing, and equilibrium or balance. We're going to kind of run through them in that order, really spending probably the most time on the most complicated of all of these systems, which is the eye. Okay, somewhere around 70% of all of your neurons, okay, all of your sensory neurons, I guess you should say that, not all of your neurons, but all of your sensory neurons are actually located in the eye. As animals, we are lousy at tasting things. We are awful at smelling things. Our hearing is shitty. Okay. Our balance is mediocre, but our vision is pretty good. Okay. That's really the one thing we've got that's kind of standout. Okay. And that's because we've got so many neurons dedicated to that. Okay. Now, this middle sentence here, visual processing by half cerebral cortex, you probably remember, hopefully remember, that we have this lateralization of the nervous system, right? Where general senses from the right side of the body go to the left side of the brain, motor signals from the left side of the brain go out to the right side of the body, right? This is the general pattern of things. The way things are done in the eye is a little bit different, and we'll spend some more time with that later on. But basically, instead of saying your right eye goes to your left brain and your left eye goes to your right brain, it's more about field of vision being split up rather than individual structures. So, like I said, we'll come back and we'll revisit that. It's just slightly different from the norm of all of the rest of the sensory structures and motor structures in your body. The eye itself, things we're not really going to talk about but are worth noting, sits in this kind of envelope of fat within the orbit. So there is this kind of really gross fatty cushion all around the eye and its surrounding structures between that and the bone. So it's not just kind of sitting there next to the skull, next to your skull. It is actually kind of protected and padded all the way around. Other things here, accessory structures we might call them. Okay, some of these I'm not going to talk about. If you don't know what an eyebrow is, this might not be the course for you, that kind of thing. But some of them are probably not terms you're familiar with, even if you might know the structures. So things like the eyelids, we'll call those palpebrae. Okay, the conjunctiva, If you are aware of it, if you have contact lenses at least. If not, you may not know it. Lacrimal apparatus, okay? You know what this is, even if you don't know the name. We'll get to that in a minute. And then, of course, there are 6 extrinsic eye muscles. These are muscles that move the eye. Extrinsic means outside, okay? So these are things that are outside of the eyeball that connect to the eyeball and to the skull to move it around within that little fatty envelope inside the orbit. Okay, so again, outside of reminding you that palpebrae is the technical term for eyelids, we're not going to talk about the first 2 at all. The conjunctiva, however, we are going to talk about, as it is kind of an important structure for us. It is a mucous membrane, okay? Now remember from A&P1, a mucous membrane doesn't necessarily make mucus, okay? A mucous membrane is simply a membrane that covers an opening or lines an opening exposed to the outside world, okay? So because your eye socket, your eye, right, is exposed to the outside world, which is why we're going to wear goggles in lab, right? It is a mucous membrane. It does, in fact, make some mucus, not a lot, okay? Most of its secretions are watery, but it does make a little mucus in there, here, there. We're going to divide it up into 2 chunks. It's kind of this situation where we have the palpebrae here and an eye in the middle. And the conjunctiva, do I have colored chalk? I don't. We've got part of it that lines the palpebra, and then it makes this little right-hand turn and lines the surface of the eye, okay, like most of our membranes do. The part that lines the eye, or the eyelid, excuse me, is the palpebral conjunctiva, right? And the part that lines the eyeball, okay, at least covers the white part of your eye, is the bulbar conjunctiva. And this little U-turn, right, this little hairpin turn that it makes between those 2, it's called the conjunctival sac, okay? And if you wear contact lenses, this is where your contact lens rests, okay? Doesn't sit anywhere else. It really only makes that contact at that one small point, the circumference of your eye. The lacrimal apparatus, again, like I said, you know what this is, even if you don't know the term. This is your tear duct, your tear gland, and its associated parts, okay? Lacrimal here, from the Latin for tears, okay? So here we are learning some Latin already. There is a gland above and to the lateral side of the eye. We'll see a picture of this here. It kind of folds over another structure within there. That's the lacrimal gland. I'll just show you the picture here. All of these terms are on this picture here as well. The lacrimal gland, as you see up there, drains into the upper lateral quadrant of the eye. The lacrimal solution then floods across the eye from upper lateral to lower medial, okay, where it drains into a canaliculus, right, the corner of your eye, and then, strangely enough, into your nasal cavity via the nasolacrimal duct. This is why when you sit down and you watch your rom-com with your stereotypical tub of Ben and Jerry's in front of you, you have a good blubbery cry. It's why your nose runs, okay? Because all of those tears are draining into your nose and mobilizing all of that dried mucus inside your nose, causing it to dribble out. Kind of gross, I realize, but they've got to go somewhere, and your body decided that was the best place for them. So be it. To move the eye around, so you may or may not be aware of this, but mammals in general, does anybody have chickens? Anybody raise chickens? Okay. When you watch a chicken, if you ever have the opportunity, and a chicken is trying to watch something moving in front of it, it has to move its whole head. Okay? It doesn't move its eyes, it has to move its whole head. If you watch your cat or your dog at home doing the same thing, their head stays still, but their eyes move. Okay? This is one of the fundamental things about being a mammal. We have the ability to track things visually without moving our heads. Okay? And that's where these extrinsic eye muscles come in. All right? They allow you to move your eyeballs independently of your skull. Kind of a cool thing. There are 6 of them. 4 of them are going to be what we call rectus muscles. Rectus, just as in your abdominal rectus, it means essentially in a line, right, or upright. Okay, so these 4 rectus muscles are going to run from the back straight to the front. Okay, so one on top, one on bottom, one on the medial side, one on the lateral side. They are called the superior, inferior, lateral, and medial rectus muscles. And they do exactly what they say on the label. When they contract, they move your eye superiorly, inferiorly, medially, or laterally. Okay? Fairly simple, orthogonal, 90-degree kinds of movements. There are also 2 additional, right, because we have 6, okay? And these are the oblique muscles. And these are, just as you might imagine from the name, not at a 90-degree angle to your skull. They are in a oblique plane. They run from here to there, right, at an angle to all of these things. They are the superior and inferior oblique muscles. And because of their oblique nature, they also involve some rotation of the eyeball. Simply, rather than simply moving, they also rotate within the space. So here they are in lateral view of the right side. So you'd be looking like this, right? The lateral rectus muscle here. Surely I have enough cable here to do this. Okay. So we've got rectus muscle here, the lateral one. Here we've got a superior rectus. Here the inferior rectus. On this side, the back there, the medial rectus. But again, all running from the back straight forward. Okay. All running in the anterior posterior plane. Right. Hard to see here, okay, but we can see part of them are the oblique muscles, right? The superior oblique, which you can't see, but is running into the screen at an oblique angle. And here, running thiswardly, is the inferior oblique muscle. We can see a slightly different view of them here, right? And get a different kind of view. Now we're looking at the top down, a superior view, and you can really see the superior oblique, right? The belly of the muscle isn't that different in terms of its orientation from the rectus muscles, right? But one very special thing is happening here that changes what we call the line of action, okay? And this is what actually, the movement, the direction of movement is what the line of action is, right? And that's got to do with this little guy right up there. There's this little loop of a ligament there called the trochlea. Okay, and all the trochlea, you can think of a trochlea. There are trochleas for everywhere. They're basically just like a little saddle or a little thing that allows the change of direction of something. Okay, and so as we pass through this trochlea and go to our insertion on the eyeball, okay, this whole long tendon, right? This is what actually the line of action actually is. So when this muscle contracts, right, even though the belly of the muscle shortens this way, okay, the eye actually rotates this way. And you can't really see it on the other side there, but there is also obviously a inferior oblique, which does something quite similar, only in the opposite direction. Now, I do want to show you, I don't have it, never mind. I will remember, hopefully, for Wednesday, I have a image of a fMRI, a functional MRI, of somebody moving their eyes, and you can actually see the muscles themselves making the action happen. It's pretty cool. Forgot to bring it in. Show it to you on Wednesday. So here are our 6 extrinsic eye muscles. What they do, okay, the action. Most of these are not too surprising, too wacky. Okay, just bear in mind the multiple actions, particularly of the obliques. Okay, the one thing on here that you hopefully remember from A&P1 is the controlling cranial nerves. Okay, now you no doubt have memorized the 12 cranial nerves and will never forget them. But probably the one that leapt out most as obviously related to this, of course, is oculomotor. All right, cranial nerve number 3. It's got the eye, it's got the motor, obviously has something to do with it. And indeed, it controls 4 of these 6 muscles. Now, they're not the 4 you might imagine, okay? Medial, superior, inferior rectus, yes, but also inferior oblique, okay? The other 2, lateral rectus and superior oblique, have their own dedicated cranial nerve. That is theirs and theirs alone. It does nothing else, okay? Lateral rectus, because its action abducts the eyeball, right? You remember from joint motions, right? Abduction to take away. It has cranial nerve number 6, the abducens nerve, because it is abducting. Superior oblique, hopefully remember from a couple of slides ago, right? It passes through that trochlea, and thus cranial nerve 4, the trochlear nerve, is responsible for innervating that one. Okay. You might have imagined at one point or another that because they all come out of the brain, that cranial nerves are all special and magical and wonderful and do all kinds of important shit. 2 of them just move one tiny little muscle. It happens. Okay, so that's all the stuff around the eyeball, right? The eyeball itself is surprisingly pretty complicated. In and of itself, it has anywhere from 2 to 3 layers depending on where we're at. Okay, if I go to the back of the eyeball, it's 3 full layers. If I go to the front, there's only 2. And each of those layers has a dedicated function to them. Okay, so all the way around the eyeball, no matter what, okay, we're going to have a fibrous layer. Okay, in front, in the back, everywhere. Towards the back 2/3, in the middle, we're going to have a vascular layer. And that is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to have blood vessels in it, right? For reasons that will become obvious, hopefully, shortly, that middle third can't have any blood vessels in it. And then we've got the delightfully and evocatively named inner layer, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the inner layer of the eyeball. To keep the eyeball itself inflated, so to speak, to provide internal pressure, okay, we're going to have a fluid in the back 2/3, right? A humor, if you will. If you are familiar with sort of old-timey medicine, right? They talk about humors, the 4 humors: phlegm, blood, urine. I forget the 4th one. I don't know. It's all quackery anyway. But we've retained that old-timey term humor here for these bodily fluids. We've got one in the back that provides structure and one in the front that provides nutrients. And we'll talk about those. And an internal structure here called the lens is responsible for dividing up the eyeball into those 2 cavities, the anterior one and the posterior one. And like I said, there's a lot going on here. I put this up here not to alarm you, I guess, but to prepare you for the idea that in something as simple as the eyeball, there's going to be a lot of anatomy for us to learn. Simple as that. Okay. So we're going to start here and finish today, too, with just this outer layer here, both in front and behind here, this fibrous layer, which, of course, is itself in 2 different regions. Okay. In the back, and honestly, most of the eyeball, we have what's called the sclera. And this is the white of the eye. Now, something interesting about humanity, humans as animals, if you go home and if you have a pet, doesn't matter if it's a lizard or a dog or a cat or a chinchilla or whatever, doesn't matter, and you look at their eyes, they don't have a white. They have essentially all colored parts of their eye. And it's thought that the white of the eye in people is a large sort of contribution to our system of communication. We do a lot of nonverbal communication. Okay. Believe it or not, more than you might imagine. Um, and being able to indicate the direction that you are looking turns out to be a pretty important thing, particularly if there is limited language or language barrier. Okay. So we have that. Most animals do not. Your dog, if he gets really excited, you might get what's called whale eye. If you go way back on the side, they do have some white that sometimes gets exposed. But generally speaking, when their eyes are in their normal position, there's no white. It's only the colored part. So that's just us. That's the sclera, okay? And that's where we're going to anchor, say, these extrinsic eye muscles and stuff like that. The part in front that you actually see through is called the cornea. It's still fibrous, it's still tough, it's still continuous with this, but it's clear, right? And the whole point behind it being clear is so that we can see, right? If light can't pass through it, you can't see. So that's kind of the big deal on that. The other thing here, the last thing I'll mention before I turn you guys loose, this actually does most of the heavy lifting in terms of focusing light, okay? The lens gets all the credit. It's the quarterback, right? Everybody talks about the lens, yada, yada, yada. It's so amazing, so important. The cornea is the offensive line, okay? It does all the actual damn work, so the lens can do what little it does, okay? If your cornea is messed up, you're not going to have any luck seeing, okay? All right, so see you guys. I won't see you. If you're at home, I will see you on Wednesday. Hopefully everything works out. We'll see how it all goes. It's all kind of a learning experience for us, but